So it's a great room. It looks like the inside of a TARDIS. We're already in the future. Welcome. So yeah, so I'd just like you to leave you then, lastly, in the culpable hands of James Newton Thomas, who also owns the company Second Tree, who sponsored the drinks.
And thank you very much, Adam. Listen, okay, now I'm a field roboticist, which means I make robots that work out in the field. Everyone grab their drinks before I start. As I said, I'm a field roboticist, working in, coincidentally to Peter Elliott's talk, in the mining industry. I effectively put robots in the mining industry. Technically we call them automation, because the mining industry is obviously a very dusty, hot, dangerous environment, and so it's an obvious one for automation to be applied, because the various machines have over the years been killing people, and so the more we can automate, the more we can get people out of the environment, the better it is for everybody. No, get rid of it. We want to watch those. Turn them off, thanks.
We can still see the pictures.
Too bright. We can't see your face because
turn it down, Adam. It's too bright.
Sorry?
We can't see your face because of the bright light behind
Do you want to see my face?
Too bright, Adam.
Well, turn that one off and everything else on.
I just don't, yeah. There we go.
You don't have to sit it backwards.
There we go.
All right, can you all see the screen? So you see the lights are coming up now, Adam. Turn it down a bit.
And well, the back lights are now off. Now they're on.
All right.
That's it.
All right, look, before I start this talk though, I'm going to show you some slides of some ancient artifacts, or actually pictures of people, which are quite old. One of them's not quite old, and I've cut it down a bit. But when you look at these, I want you to look at them and put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're looking at, and see if you can do that. So we'll start off. The first one is this, it's a Roman Gallic harvester. Comes to the city of Trier, up on the border of Luxembourg, and you can see a couple of guys working the field there with a donkey. Pretty straightforward. That's about 1800 years old, and pretty much you can see what they're doing. They've got the harvester, they're moving it through the grain, or maize in this case, and they're cutting it off as it goes into the hopper, while the other guy steers the donkey and collects the grain. Pretty straightforward. You can all sort of empathise with what those people are doing. Let's look at the next one. This is 2,000 years old, Roman relief. Obviously the kid's got a laptop computer or something, and the woman sitting on the chair wearing clothes of the day is doing something on that computer. Again, fantastic art, but again, you can look at that and you can understand what's going on. You can put yourself in the shoes of those people, or the togas and sandals or whatever they're wearing. Right? I'll take you now to a modern one. Many of you will have seen this. Great Depression, 1932. 11 guys having lunch, famous photo, 11 guys having a lunch over 600 feet above the Rockefeller Center. Right? Again though, you can put yourself in their shoes. You might like it, but you can say, okay, I understand what it would be like to be there. So let's just quickly look at those pictures again. That's 2,000 years of history, and pretty much, except for the laptop, we can understand what's going on. The question I put to you is, if in another 2,000 years we were to look back at us, would we understand ourselves? Would we understand what we are looking at? And I put it to you, the answer is no. Twofold. Firstly, we probably won't die. The persons or person, there may only be one, the persons or person of the future will probably not die. They won't have a concept of death, and death is so intrinsic to our culture and society, and has been for so long, that it will open an entire new perspective. And secondly, most importantly, now we can get a signal from our brain to the other side of the country and back again faster than a brain can get a signal from one hemisphere to the other using standard axonal transport. What this means is that in the future, our relationship with our extended phenotype, things like our iPads, our cars, things that we have and own, our relationship with those will be far more intimate than our relationship with ourselves. Those will become not just our tools, they will become part of us. The iPad will become part of you. Similarly, your connection with other people, as a recent rat experiment done where they connected up the 2 rats in the US, that will also mean that our relations with other people will have a much higher bandwidth communication, potentially, if it's not banned, and it will change the nature of what it is to be human. That our current phenotype will be extended to include our extended phenotype. All right, now I'm going to look at the process by which this is happening, the current mechanism by which these things. And I'm going to start off with discussing this thing called the Human Capabilities Matrix. And the Human Capabilities Matrix is looking at our current phenotype, which has evolved over millions of years. And here we are, standing before you, a set of DNA which expresses itself into the proteins that you see talking to you now. And that body that I have has certain capabilities. It has certain abilities. It has certain tolerances. And these tolerances, of course, allow us to do work in certain areas, but they restrict the domain that we do work in. Here's one, work by temperature. You can see on the left, when it gets too cold, my work output in watts drops. When it gets too hot, my work output in watts drops, and I die. And on the inside, I die as well. And of course, in the mining industry, where a deep metalliferous mine, we've got a metalliferous plume coming up from the deep mantle, and it's very hot. You'll have 50 degrees, 100% humidity. People die in that environment. And hence, they call on people like me to suffer that environment and automate the systems in there as much as possible. But the Human Capabilities Matrix, of course, is vastly more than just heat and temperature. It includes our senses. It includes our dexterity. It includes our ability to cooperate with other people. Vast amount of elements that go into this comprising what we call our Human Capabilities Matrix. And if we plot all of these on a massive multi-dimensional isosurface, we get something like this. This is just a general representation, don't take it literally or anything, but just imagine a massive isosurface, multi-dimensional, showing what a human being with our current phenotype can do and has been able to do for the 2,000 years that you saw of the people in those pictures. When we come to do something, of course, jobs require a little bit less than our current capability. Obviously, jobs don't tax us to the entire amount. So the typical job requires a certain amount of exposure to a particular temperature, a particular pressure, a particular mental states to organize and to do the job required. And so you take a job space, which has its own requirements, you overlay it with our with our capabilities matrix, and you get this disparity between the two. Clearly, now that's a pretty simple concept that I'm trying to put across. This is all a human being can be, naked without clothes, and our jobs require a little bit more. And so what do? We augment ourselves. We augment ourselves. And in my industry, we have PPE, personal protective clothing. We have large machines to carry the loads. On the right-hand side there, you can see a semi-autonomous machine doing ground support being watched by some of the workers. These devices are all augmenting our abilities. The miners control those machines, or they're not only, of course, in that industry. Oh, sorry, let's go on. So before augmentation, we have a slight disparity. After augmentation, we can do the job. All right, pretty straightforward. Before augmentation, we can't do the job. After augmentation, we can do the job. Or I should say, we can't do the job safely. In some cases, and in some circumstances, military, people do things that are incredibly dangerous and they don't come back. But that's the job. All right, now augmentation, of course, can take many forms. In my case, this is one of the type of machines I work on, I developed, which is an autonomous loader. That machine can be controlled by one person sitting on the surface, out of harm's way, and he can control that machine, which will drive itself down the tunnels, scoop up rocks, dump them other places, and he doesn't have to do anything except push a button and it'll drive itself. The important thing is he can now drive 4 machines at one time. So that one worker is now augmented to do the job space that used to take up to, say, 4 operators. That's a good thing because those people are out of the dangerous environment, you might say. Let's now compare that. Let's compare that to 2,000 years ago, to our Gallic harvester. You can see the things are remarkably similar. We've got the hopper out the front, but instead of scooping up rocks like my machine does, the one at the top scoops up grain. Instead of having a donkey, 1 horsepower or a little bit less, we've got a 460 odd horsepower Cat engine pushing that thing around. But essentially you can see a similar thing. There is, however, a fundamental difference, and this is what I want to talk about. And just listening to some of the talks before, there's an old saying, everything with a silver lining has this big dark cloud in the middle. And so I want to start to touch on that big dark cloud. When you look at this, there is a fundamental difference between the augmentation that we see happening here and the augmentation that we see happening here. And that difference is this. These guys own that machine. That machine augments them and they own it. The same way you go to university or school and you get an education, you walk out of that university, you own that. It's yours. It's yours. You own that augmentation. So therefore, when you go and work, you get paid for it. People say, oh, you're a clever guy, we'll pay you more money. Those guys, their productivity goes up. Sure, they may not even own the land back in those days, but their productivity goes up, and so therefore they get more for their labours. The workers here do not own that machine. That machine is owned by the company, which basically gives it to the workers, trains the workers, and then augments them so that they perform the work of more than one worker, and of course more safely in that environment. Let's look at another example. Similarly, this is a car manufacturer, Tesla Motors in the United States. Over here you can see the one sole worker in that factory at the moment. And those machines are unique in robots in that they are actually multi-skilled. They're not just robots, they're multi-skilled robots. So each one will do riveting, welding, fitting, and forming, as well as doing just one job, which robots used to do, specialized tasks. So those are actually multi-skilled robots. But again, the worker whose output, because the worker is still guiding those, the worker is making decisions of a strategic nature and planning, they are not owning the technology that's augmenting them. And the consequence is that they don't necessarily get the rewards for that augmentation that are commensurate to the amount of work that is now being output by the system. Now I'm going to show you a graph which was provided by our resident truck driver economist, Jack Strucky, down here. Thank you, Jack. Everyone give Jack a hand, please. But this is a very interesting chart. This chart is showing you real manufacturing output and employment in one particular industry, the manufacturing sector in the United States. It's Bureau of Commerce data, so and you can see that over time, since 1947 through to 2005, where that chart goes to, you can see that the manufacturing employment as a percentage has dropped in a pretty linear fashion. Yet the output of the manufacturing sector has remained horizontal. If we extrapolate that chart If we extrapolate that chart, you'll see, with pretty naive linear assessment, by the year about 2030, there will be no one employed in manufacturing in the United States. Just a linear thing. Now, I'm not saying that's actually the case. And of course, I'm not saying that those jobs, those people have gone forever. In reality, a lot of them have gone to the service industries, have gone other places and done other work. But the simple fact is that there will be no one employed in that industry. But look at the profits or the output as a percentage of GDP will stay, if the line is correct, pretty much horizontal. So that 15% of profit, which used to go to pay workers, or 15% of GDP, that used to go to pay workers in that industry, now goes to the owners of the means of production. Using a marketing phrase. Goes to the owners of the means of production. So this is a real problem. And it's a problem sort of born of capitalism itself, because capitalism internally maintains two sets of value. Instrumental value, which is what we can do, and intellectual value, or intellectual property and instrumental property. Your body and what you can do with it, and your mind and what you can plan to do with it, and how you can organize other things. So you've got instrumental capital and intellectual capital. The problem with that is, where does human capital, or humanity, fit into this equation? If we look at, and for the last few hundred years, and let's face it, I am a capitalist, for the last few hundred years, capitalism has provided the greatest raise in wealth ever. An enormous amount of, and so for a long time, it was helping us. You know, with that extra wealth, we could buy human cribs, we could do things that help us as human beings. There is a convergence between the two, that the two are like symbiotic, that the capitalist system was symbiotic to humanism. By being wealthy, we could send money to the starving in Africa. By being wealthy, we can build our human cribs. It helps us do good and humanitarian things. The problem is now, because of automation, the very thing I'm in, there is the potential in the future to diverge, that the capitalist aims will diverge from the humanist aims. And I suggest that that is now starting to happen. I'm not pessimistic about this, because there are things we can do about it, and so long as we have a rule of government, then we can do things. But remember, capitalism itself has no brakes. You can steer it a little bit with legislation, but it is intrinsically designed to overcome obstacles within itself. If somebody puts legislation or something against it, it'll find a way around it. Like tax evasion. It'll find something to do to get around the problem that you put up to it. And again, if it's diverging from humanist values, that can be a problem. So let's go back to our human capabilities matrix. What is it about us then that will keep us in the loop? What's keeping us in the loop now? Why, for instance, what is it that we can do that other machines can't? It's not our sensors, because clearly, say in vision, we only look at a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. But of course, machines, they can go everywhere, from microwaves, X-rays, terahertz now, all the way up to X-rays. So it's not in sensors. Dexterity, maybe. Well, let's have a look at machine dexterity. Here's some of you may have seen this. There's a slow motion view of a little two-fingered robot bouncing a ball backwards and forwards. It's doing pretty well. Makes a mistake soon, puts a bit of spin on the ball so it comes straight up. Has it go for it, you watch it have a go for it, can't do it, and gives up. Alright? Pretty impressive. Okay, let's look at it in real time. Now let's look at it in real time. Who reckons they could do that? Right? Who reckons they could do that? Here it is again with sound on. So, no, I didn't hear the sound. But dexterity, we've lost it. Right? The machines can beat us with dexterity. Here's another one. Here's a little thing. Tying a rope, tying a bit of string by twisting it in midair and throwing it out. Look, you probably didn't catch it. I'll do it again so you can watch it. You watch. See that? Ties a knot in that rope. There's dexterity for you. Who could do that? Who here in this room could do what that machine can do? Let's have a look at agility, another thing that we're very good at. This is a quadricopter balancing a pole on its hand, right? on itself while it flies. But of course that's not good enough. What we want to do is throw that pole from one to the other. See that? That's a quadricopter throwing a pole, balancing it onto the second one. Let's do it again. The reason there's a bit of a gap here is because they're actually talking about the thing at the moment. You're probably not hearing it. This is just showing the maths involved, and you can see how accurate this thing is able to perform the task that's been given. Think of its agility. The reason it's basically flying up to the point, it recognises that there's no force left on the pole, so the pole is now in free flight. Then the first quadricopter turns itself over to slow down, and then so it doesn't sail up into the roof, and then the pole is thrown to the second quadricopter. So that's the computer projecting where it's going to land. You watch how close it gets. Not bad. Not bad. Who here thinks they could do that? Well, maybe jugglers could do that. Some people could do that. But that's like, you think you're a flying machine, you've got a little tiny patch. Not bad. Alright, let's move on to the next example I want to show, which is also using quadricopters, showing cooperative behaviour. Enough of the pole catching. Let's move on to, these are, by the way, these are out of Zurich. So here's a couple of quadricopters holding a net, catching a ball. Oh, they also throw the ball too, I meant to mention. Now why can they do that? The reason is because they can talk to each other, and the remote system can talk, and they are doing all those movements and control at about 60 cycles per second. We are lucky to do 10, and even then with an approximation. What you'll see now is they'll move over and I'll start throwing at a new target that they haven't seen before, and they will learn to get more accurate over time. So here they are trying to throw the ball through the hoop. It's being held by the two on the left. They missed, so they have another go. Missed again, and third time lucky. So there they go. They can actually learn as they proceed. And finally, just as a vote of confidence, the Swiss guys throw a camera into the net itself. So. All right, so let's hear it for the quadricopters. All right, so a couple of examples of the capabilities of modern machines. So what is it about us that makes us special? And of course we all know the answer, it's our mind. We are able to look at problems currently that are generic. That's why we don't currently have your anthropomorphic robots, which is of course what people are trying to do. They take the robots, they build them like us, and there's good reason to do that because we want to be able to use the same infrastructure that we're currently using. There's no point in building special roads and autonomous vehicles when we've got hundreds of vehicles out there now. What the holy grail of robotics is, of course, is something like this that can actually take our place, sit in the current infrastructure that we're using, use our stairs, use our door handles, and integrate itself with our society and do the work. Our mental capacity, however, obviously has a finite lifetime. It's not going to be forever that computers will be before they start to get close to us. In fact, modern supercomputers, as you can see by this graph, have been increasing relatively linearly, and we're now getting to the range that we are. The current crop of supercomputers is now firmly into the area that was once the domain of humans. That's in terms of connectivity. That's in terms of the number of calculations per second that can be done in a modern supercomputer. And I have to point out that most of our brain is running our body. It's not focused on these tasks of driving machines. It's focused on running this body that we're in. It's only a small part, or part of the cerebral cortex, which is actually doing the work. And in that, if you look at that, desktop computers are usually about 10 to 15 years behind supercomputers, which means that in about 10 to 15 years, all of us will have in our hands computers which are going to be at least able to be as smart as we are. I'm not saying that we'll have the software to do that at that point. We may have it. The Obama Brain Project, which was recently announced, is certainly a step in the right direction. But certainly in 10 to 15 years, we will have enormous processing power in our hands. Now remember what I said before. Our interface with those things in our hands, that new processing power, is going to become vastly more infinite, vastly more intimate than it currently is. Here's a couple of other graphs which you might find interesting. That's the cost per gigaflop. Currently it's 8, and of course, most importantly, that's how much it costs to have kids these days, based on how much kids are, and to put them through university and to get them to a stage where they can go out into the workforce with a basic platform to do pretty much anything. The cost of kids, we can see that now, in terms of gigaflops, our cost of computing is now lower than the cost of kids. And now I say to you, if capitalism is all about reducing costs, and it's cheaper to employ computers than growing humans, what will capitalism do? And that's really all I want to say. So, thank you very much.
I think we have time for a couple of questions now.
Wait, hold on. Now, there's a consequence to
Oh, well,
dusty noise.
James is a true cyborg.
Hear anything, so I'm going
He's
to put
really
on my
intimate
little
with his phone.
amplifiers.
Okay, who wants to ask a question? Go for it, Planet Man.
Can you make it really loud too?
Don't the capitalists at least need us to consume what they create?
Wait on. Sorry, say again.
Don't the capitalists need us to consume what they create?
Okay, consumption. The problem is, and people talked about this before, when things cost nothing, they disappear from the capitalist system, like air. If you go from capitalism into a system of abundance, and abundance doesn't work. So when 3D printers and things like that, whilst Obama has also mentioned them in one of his initiatives, they could spell disaster for the US and the world's economies, because it means that the cost of everything goes down to nothing. And look at the problems the record industry are having with cheap and free music. People are all scrabbling for a business model. Look at the internet itself, right? When all this free information's out there and people saying, oh, that's incredibly useful, but how are they going to make any money out of it? It's a real problem. Sorry, was that a question, Tony?
Adding to your answer,
Yep.
water in a bottle instead of out of a tap is how you make value out of nothing.
Yeah, unless taps are really convenient and available. Okay, point taken. Look, I'm not saying there aren't ways that you can value add to things that are out there, but tell that to the record industry, who is now trying to say, all right, how can we put our sounds in a bottle and people can buy them?
I got a question for you, James.
Real problem. Jack?
Is there anything that humans can do that machines can't do better?
Now?
Yes,
Or you mean
yes, there
In the
is.
future.
There is, and that is, we are human. We have an intrinsic value in ourselves. So if we can get that intrinsic human value recognized, then of course we have a place. If we can have a monetary amount put on our intrinsic value, then yes, of course we can. But currently it isn't there. People are assuming.
Will that create a market of training how to become more human?
Only a nerd would say something like that.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
What do you say to the suggestion that Adam Smith's invisible hand is a pathetic, irresponsible delusion? We are responsible.
He said a lot more than that.
Look, the invisible hand, for what people are saying, is saying, look, we have this massive economy, and if you do things, it'll just right itself, as if an invisible hand will come and push you, and because everything will get together, it'll just right itself. Yeah, it works up to a point, and I'm saying with modern technology, it will cease to work. It won't work, and capitalism, the way it's going now, is now diverging from humanist values and will no longer function. The Chinese have a solution, state capitalism, where they own the companies and therefore they get a share in the profits that are there. So it doesn't matter how much the companies rationalise their workforce. And China, I have to say, is rationalising their workforce faster than any other country on earth, believe it or not. They're the ones they're bringing in the new machines as fast as they can. But their major companies are part and often majority owned by the government. So consequently, they are in a better position to capture the wealth for the good of the society, so long as the elite of the Communist Party are working in the interests of society. And I'm not going to get into that.
You agree with that, with the suggestion?
Sorry?
So you agree with the suggestion or do you disagree with it?
I think we're going to have to go to a more socialist system than we currently have. Look, I've been a capitalist for years. I was a stockbroker. I've worked in these financial markets. I love these markets. I love capitalism. But I think it's now diverging from humanist values. And I think people just have to recognise that.
We've got one more over here.
Yes.
James, I recall that before Apple removed it, there was an app on the App Store which was arbitrarily expensive. I can't remember the exact price. It did nothing.
I am rich.
But I am rich. There you go. The only function of it was the social signalling function to show that if you could afford to buy the app, you were wealthy.
That was the diamond one, wasn't it? It had a nice picture of a
Something
red
like
diamond. It cost
Yeah.
$800.
So could it be that we move to an economy where all trade is purely social signaling?
Yeah, but that's all very well and good if we've got something to trade. If every part of us, including our mind, is no longer valuable because the machines can do it better, and those machines are not owned by us, it's a real problem. I mean, look at society where you have groups of people who are unemployed. Prisons, that's not a nice place. Refugee camps, that's not a nice place. I'm not saying that that's what we're going to end up with, because there's obviously mechanisms in place that would be unacceptable. Where we live in a democracy and people will just vote saying, no, we want a bigger slice of the pie.
Well, the reputation-based economy would be one responsible.
Possibly. Look, the search for status is obviously going to be still there. That's it. Colin?
Isn't this kind of like the Star Trek economy coming true? What is a replicator in Star Trek? It's a 3D printer, right? It's kind of like, and the mission in Star Trek was to better oneself, and that's all you did. There was no money.
That's true. Look, the problem with we
change
face,
everything.
one of the clearly serious problems we face is that when you've got nothing to do, people turn to alcohol, drugs, video games, other ways to escape. They create virtual worlds and then go and live in those and they put themselves in artificial, not real danger, and they live in those worlds. And how many people have kids here who play video games all the time or who know of them? It's a real problem that of course people are now looking for their biological based excitement, which is being chased by dinosaurs and in wars, etc. And of course they get into these virtual worlds, they muscle themselves up, covered in tattoos. All women look like sluts, all men look like monstrous he-guys, and they just socialise with each other, and it's not real, right? It's not real, or is it real? And that's another question entirely. Look, it's a real problem. I must say I'm not here necessarily proffering solutions. I'm just saying we have a problem and we need the dialogue. We need people in rooms like this talking about it so that we can start to find solutions. Yes?
Just not talk about this planet, but any given planet, if the development of technology overtakes its social conscience, then we're in trouble. And I think that's one of the themes of what you're saying. In Papua New Guinea, the government automatically takes about 20% stake or equity stake in a mine that they develop in Papua New Guinea. They deny themselves the ability to stand back and regulate for environmental or social terms that commercial operation. They are part of it. So if we don't have the social conscience to do that at the same time, it's a very difficult thing to do.
I agree, and of course, one of the problems we've got in places like Papua New Guinea is it's people like the Taiwanese. It's Taiwanese groups come in there, buy up all the forests, and it's an international problem. So whilst Australia may have a social conscience, and we might say, all right, we're going to not emit greenhouse gases, our problem is the rest of the world is still doing it. We have it's a second problem on top of that first problem of rampant capitalism, and that is that we don't have a kind of global government that can step in and say, this is what we need to do as a world. Because the problems we face now are global problems. They're not local problems anymore, they're global problems, and we need global solutions.
You're arguing for international communism, basically.
Okay.
What will the future super rich corporations with no humanist heart want to be spending all their enormous profits on?
Well, presumably those super rich corporations, unless something goes really awry, will themselves be owned by people who will crave status in some way. They will have their own, remember, the interface with machines will make a different species, which I can't necessarily predict. There may be different goals, different ambitions. I don't know. But the most troubling of all is that we will probably, I would suggest, the downside, we might end up in a kind of solipsistic universe, living in a kind of virtual world where we give ourselves the experiences of the past. We have these kind of Bostrom stimulations of the past, which we might well be in right now, living in them, and who knows? And so solipsistic, we're not really doing anything in the real world anymore, we're just reliving the adventures of the past. Look at movies, everyone loves movies, I love movies. Imagine movies which are totally immersive, where you're tactile, where you live in it for a few years, and you pop out again. That's what you're going to have. Solipsistic. Humans are trapped in this kind of solipsistic. Yeah, and maybe there, as an astronomer, that's the answer to the Fermi paradox. Because they're all living in their little solipsistic universes and they've lost touch with reality, which is the machines just look after.
Well, I can prove that that's not true because I choose to be somebody else.
Okay. All right. One more question, and I think people are packing up. Yes. Sorry?
I don't know if it's relevant, but...
No, I have to do high pitch.
I don't know if it's relevant, but is there a way to keep us separated as far as like, whenever we learn something new and we invent something, it helps us evolve, and then we evolve it further.
Adapt.
We adapt, yeah, well, sorry, but is there a way that we could make these machines help us adapt quicker, fit on a biological level, instead of having to integrate
Probably, but then of course we're changing what it is to be human, and that's a dangerous thing. Look, I'll give you an example. We're going to have machines in the next 15 years that will talk like us, maybe 20 years, that can answer any question, they'll be erudite, they'll be funny, but they won't be conscious. Right? They'll be zombies. They're not really there.
Haven't we lost some of the qualities of the brain, though?
Well, that's a terrible thing, because the trouble is people anthropomorphise cars now. They anthropomorphise teddy bears. How are they going to deal with something that's able to talk and walk and relate to them? They will assume that thing is conscious, but it's not. Of course, the most valuable thing we have is our consciousness. It's not the fact that we can walk around and talk and look at things. It's that we have an experience of existence. This marvelous thing that we have, that this subjective experience where the subjectivity crosses the objectivity, where we exist, where we know we exist, we feel we exist, we are. Now we'll be able to build machines that act like that, say that, but they don't have that. They're empty. They're zombies. And that's going to be another problem we have. Look, I'm sorry, I'm full of problems. All right? But these are things you need to think about. Can we adapt ourselves? The danger in doing that is you might throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't, it's not a trivial thing. We can probably adapt ourselves and plug yourself in, but you might lose consciousness in the process. You come out better. You're more, you're up there with the world. You're really funny. People are happy to have you around, but you're not there. You've gone. And that's one of the dangers. But until we understand what consciousness is, which we currently don't, we've got to be very careful about adapting ourselves and changing ourselves.
Let's throw another one, there's speciation. Speciation effect.
All right, look, I'm going to call it quits here.